This will be the first official dev blog for the Assassination game mode for Star Wars Battlefront II. It's been about a week since I first uploaded a video demoing the game mode and its progress at that point. So in the past week I've made a significant amount of progress toward making the game mode a lot more fun and increasing playability significantly. I've also added a number of features that allow users who will be using the script in their own custom maps to create a very diverse and unique experience tailored to their own needs and tastes for how the game will be played. I've fixed a number of bugs in the code that caused some strange behaviors. There were a number of bugs that never really showed themselves unless there was a certain number of conditions that were met simultaneously. I've done my best to eliminate those bugs entirely. There is still a fair amount of work that needs to be done on killing the rest of those bugs, and I'm sure there will be a number of other new bugs that introduce themselves as I add new features into the mode. Let's move on and talk about some new features. I've added the ability for users to make more difficult levels of guards. This is similar to the concept in Grand Theft Auto, where the longer a player stays in trouble with the law, the more difficult enemies will appear and start trying to kill the player. The player will also now receive a message whenever the number of stars is increased. And by stars, I'm referring to the concept that is implemented in the Grand Theft Auto games. I also finally got around to implementing more sophisticated anonymity checking. Whereas before it was simply an area that a player had to escape in order to become anonymous, I've now added back the functionality where a player must now be a certain distance away from all enemies, as well as outside of the area. The player will receive a different message if he is outside of the area and too close to a guard. Being outside of the area and still too close to a guard will still result in an increase in stars earned by the player, and subsequently the spawning of more difficult enemies. I've added a brief delay between the player becoming anonymous and the appearance of the message saying that you are now anonymous. This allows the AI time to switch their goals and stop shooting at the player. Previously there was an issue where the anonymous message displayed, but a number of guard units would continue shooting at the player even as they started running away. This was challenging and frustrating for players, as it provided mixed messages, and could sometimes end up in the player taking extra damage that could have easily been avoided. I've also added a Hud Timer to each target. The player now has a limited time to eliminate each target in order to avoid being defeated. I've reworked the HUD a little bit, in a very basic way. At the top, instead of reinforcements being displayed, the blue number indicates the player's points, which are assigned for killing targets, and subtracted for killing civilians. The red number indicates the number of stars that the player has accrued. When anonymous, it will show 0. When detected, it will show 1, and the longer the player is detected, the higher the number will become. It will progress to 2, 3, and so on until it reaches 5 stars. When the player becomes anonymous again, it will drop back down to 0 immediately. I've reworked one of the main mechanics of the game mode as well. Previously, all targets were spawned on the map at the same time at the beginning of the game, and ran around freely. If the player killed the wrong target, then the player would be defeated. I've since changed this so that targets now spawn one at a time. Once the player has killed a target and evaded the guards, then the next target will spawn. This prevents the possibility for confusion, declutters the map a little bit, and just makes things easier for the player in general. I've also added mission objective text to the map screen so that the player can easily check which target is the current one. While I've already removed targets that are not the current objective from the map, this should still be helpful, as the player will not forget who they are looking for, and on larger, more cluttered maps with more civilians, this will provide the player with an aid to help them remember who they're going after. In my demo map, you can see I've made some visual changes, including the lighting and the sky. I've also added a pair of outposts on either end of the map. These provide a nice vantage point for the player, as well as providing a sense of depth to the map that was not previously there with the flat terrain. It's important to note that this is not the example map that I mentioned in the work in progress thread. This is simply a test environment to ensure that the game mode itself functions properly. Character models, weapons, map layout, all of it is placeholder for the time being. Once I have the game mode nailed down, I'll start on making a proper map to showcase its highlights and strengths. Right now I'm in the process of making some changes to the difficult enemies. Right now, the first time the player accrues stars, at 2 stars a certain kind of enemy will spawn, at 3 stars another kind will spawn, at 4 stars a third kind will spawn, and at 5 a last and extremely difficult kind will spawn. However, when the player returns to 0 stars, all of these different kinds of difficult units will remain. They will be killed, and I have added the functionality for those units to be removed from the map so that they aren't running around anymore. However, the next time the player reaches 2 stars or more, they will all spawn at the same time. And I would like to change this so that it is similar to Grand Theft Auto, where they will have to go through the star progression again to be spawned back into the game in that particular order. I'm also just working out a couple of bugs with the target timer, and that should be solved shortly. Right now there are only a few new features that I'm hoping to add to the mod. The basics of the actual game mode are all set in place, and at this point it's just about refining the gameplay and fixing bugs. Stay tuned for more details, and please feel free to check out the work in progress thread at GameToast.com. Thanks for watching.